Hi, my name is Brittany, and I'm an entrepreneur living in Barcelona.
Hi, yes, and I'm Dave Asomaning. I live in Florida and I'm an executive coach. I specialize in supporting CEOs, executives, and entrepreneurs to develop their miracle mindsets for improved effectiveness, ease, and fulfillment in both their professional and personal lives.
These are our monthly miracle conversations where we just like to sit down face to face over the internet and talk about some miracle mindset topics related to improving your mindset and transforming your life and getting better results in your personal life and in your business life. Today, we are going to be pulling a resource from A Course in Miracles, and we like to take each lesson into a conversation and see what we can glean from it in these conversations. So today, we're going to be using lesson number 92 from A Course in Miracles, which says, "Miracles are seen in light, and light and strength are one." So Dave, why don't you explain to us what that means and what we can take away from that lesson?
Sure, Brittany, and thank you for doing this interview series with me. I want to add that before we dig into the lesson. Really
It's my
appreciate it.
pleasure.
Yeah, so this lesson is a long lesson. It's got quite a few different moving parts in it, and I recommend to our audience to read it through. If you're, especially if you're interested in really grasping what it's saying, read it through maybe a couple of times. But what I get from it and what I'd like to share today can be broken down into three main parts, I think. So, in the first part of what I'm going to share about this lesson, there are a number of dichotomies that it outlines for us. So, for instance, these dichotomies are between light and darkness. Light and darkness, I think, is especially important because that alludes to the the pivotal theme of this lesson. Miracles are seen in light, and light and strength are one. So that first dichotomy is a pretty important one, the one between light and darkness. And then it talks about several others: truth and illusion, strength and weakness, love and fear, and then forgiveness and condemnation. Now, it doesn't list these the way I'm doing it. I'm just extracting how I reacted to the lesson and what I got from it. And so that would be the first part of what I think it's important to highlight, right? That there are all these differences, and our theme, the theme of this series that Brittany and I are doing for this year, 2021, is on forgiveness, right? And so that dichotomy between forgiveness and condemnation is an important one that I'll say a little bit more about in just a moment. So that's the first area, these dichotomies. In the second area, we've got, um, I think, what the lesson is highlighting as the cause of these dichotomies. If we look at light or strength or love or forgiveness, the things that are on the power side or the good side of the dichotomies, I think what the Course is saying is that those come from a source of light deep inside of us, and that the negative side of the dichotomies, darkness, weakness, fear, condemnation, they come from things having to do with the body. Now, I want to be clear, I want to be really emphatic that the Course is not demonizing our bodies, right? It's not saying the body is bad, but it is trying to highlight that in its system of teaching, the ego, the malicious ego, I'll hasten to add, will use the body to hurt us, to weaken us, to disempower us. So it really depends on whether, in the way we approach life, we are following the dictates of the ego and how we approach the body, in which case it is very limited and will cause us a lot of pain and suffering, or whether we use the spirit as the guide to how we understand the body, in which case the body is like a very useful form of clothing. It keeps us protected from the elements and all of that. So that's point number two, that there's a little bit more to say about that in just a moment. But Brittany, let me check to see what you're thinking or feeling, or where you are.
When I hear you mention these terms in this dichotomy, I'm picturing kind of like a T-chart, and we have a column with everything, all the capacities of the spirit, and those are the things like love and light and truth. And then we've got this column with the capacities, the limitations of the body, which are more associated with the fear and the darkness, and the fear, the darkness, and the illusion. And they often say that fear is an illusion. So when we have these two columns, we can kind of check in with our mood throughout the day and ask ourselves, which of these columns are we living in right now? Because we have a spirit and we have a body, but sometimes we feel like we're fighting flesh and blood, we're fighting for the core needs, and sometimes we feel like we can put some of those things aside in order to transcend some of the pains that are associated with our, worldly needs and perceived worldly needs, and focus on a higher way of thinking, more like unconditional love and things like that. And that's where I think you're going to hint that forgiveness is kind of the vehicle to go from that first column to the second one.
Exactly. Thank you for what you've just shared. Very helpful to hear you frame all the different elements so far in the way you did. Excellent.
Thank you.
I love that. Yeah. And so with the second area where we have the sort of the explanation of how the body can limit us or how the spirit can free us, I want to introduce an example which may be familiar to many people in the audience, and it's the example of the movie The Matrix. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, Brittany, but just briefly, the way in which I think the course is connected to what that movie is teaching us is that the body and all the things that the body is preoccupied with in the so-called external world are like the simulation that we're living in.
Right. Yeah.
And that the ego wants to pull us into the simulation and get us so caught up in all the different aspects of the simulation that we don't even recognize anymore that it's a simulation, and we think it's real. And so the illusion of the simulation, the physical simulation that we live in, and the body's attunement to that, then becomes the reality that we're struggling with. And then we've forgotten what's really going on.
Right.
And we're no longer in touch with our Neo-like capacities, right? Neo is the hero of the Matrix story. And in that story, he has a gradual series of awakenings to what the simulation is about and his role in waking up from the simulation. Or the nightmare of this simulation. So that's where the light and miracles and forgiveness come in. This is the third part, right? That the course is teaching us that we are also living in a similar simulation. It never refers to the Matrix, just to be clear, but it's a good metaphor to quickly understand what it's trying to get at, right? And so what it's basically saying, the punchline to the whole thing is that if we are enamored of and wrapped up in the Matrix, we won't have access to the light inside, the strength inside, the joy, the peace, all the good things inside that you were highlighting in terms of that T diagram. And so forgiveness won't make any sense to us. We'll actually do the opposite of forgiveness. In other words, we'll invest in condemnation and attack of the things that we see in the Matrix, or the illusion of the physical world, rather than going deeper and deeper into the inner source light that will give us the understanding of how to help other people wake up from the Matrix, which is what the forgiveness principle is about in this lesson. It's really about helping people wake up from the nightmare that they're kind of asleep in and struggling with and fearful of. So that's, and the miracles, forgiveness, they all kind of go hand in hand.
Right. And the hard part is that these realities seem so real to us, just like when you're in a dream or a nightmare and you could swear that it's real. And it only until you wake up do you realize that that wasn't real at all. And none of that really even made sense.
That's right. It's like there's such relief. It's like, oh my God, it was an illusion. It was like, that wasn't real. Oh my God, I'm so glad none of that was real. But when you're in it, oh my goodness, it's just the worst. And it does seem real, to your point. Absolutely.
And you can have that wake up experience within just a second. And that's the other beautiful thing about this metaphor is you can choose to tap out. I've chosen to wake up from dreams before, actually. I was like, this is too ridiculous. There's no way. And then I got out of it.
Is that right? You actually were in the dream and you said to yourself, I'm going to wake up from this
Yeah,
actual sleeping
yeah.
dream. Okay.
Yeah. And then I had an experience in real life where I thought I must be dreaming because this is too ridiculous. I got COVID a few weeks back and I was like doing all my techniques, like, am I dreaming? Is this really happening? The day before I had a flight to go back home, and it was real.
I mean, I don't even know what the progression of it is, really. We've heard so much about it, but
Yeah, for me and my whole family, it was just a very mild cold, luckily.
all right. So, wow. Well, I'm glad you're okay. Yeah.
Yeah, California.
Yeah.
They worry about me being in Europe, but I got it in California. That's, yeah.
Well, yeah. So that's another collective nightmare, right? COVID,
Definitely, yeah.
sickness, war, genocide,
Mhm.
just all the terrible things we see in the world.
Mhm.
They're all part of this simulation. They have really tragic consequences for human lives, our lives.
Mhm.
So not to
Mhm.
minimize them by saying that they're an illusion, but all these spiritual sort of methods are about another reality that can help us wake up ultimately and
Mhm.
permanently from these
Mhm.
different, very, very nightmarish simulations that the ego
Yeah.
is torturing us with. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks for sharing that about COVID.
But yeah, that's one of the worst things about this virus is just how much fear has been spread as a result. Of course, the virus is problematic in and of itself, but on top of that, people are struggling mentally, emotionally, and I've even had friends who've been physically sick because of the stress of the virus, not actually having the virus.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just stress related, emotional related. Mm-hmm.
You're right. And we hear so much about the increase in chemical dependency and domestic
Mm-hmm.
abuse and violence and I
Yeah.
mean, all these other stress factors, not to mention the way in which the economies of different parts of the world have been devastated and people's
Mm-hmm.
livelihoods, and then your security about where you live and food on the table. I mean, it's endless. The
Mm-hmm.
stressors that have been unleashed in this gigantic collective nightmare. It's
Mm-hmm.
and again, what we're working on in this conversation, and for all the people doing it through the course and all the other systems in the world beyond the course or besides the course, I mean, every bit helps us to wake up from the process that draws us into nightmares individually and collectively. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So that's the lesson. I mean, that's as much as I wanted to touch on about the lesson. It's the sequence of things, and ultimately we're tapping into this inner light that will enable us to then become miracle workers who understand that forgiveness means helping to liberate people from the nightmares they're caught up in.
Yes, and it then allows you to be more logical on every field once you have these realizations.
Yeah, so I think this is a good thing for CEOs and executives and
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs and other leaders to be aware of, as a
Mm-hmm.
skill set that
Definitely.
they bring into the practical things they do and making sure the trains run on time and that economies run on time and COVID
Mm-hmm.
vaccines get delivered. I mean, all of that practical stuff is really super, super important. And there are so many people who are
Mm-hmm.
gifted and skilled in executing on those things. Um, and then at the same time, part of my mission is to support uh, various leaders who are interested in this to add this to their toolkit in terms of how they're waking up from the nightmare and helping other people wake up from the matrix or the simulation. Yeah.
That's very important. So can you tell us about a time in your life when you've had to put these principles into practice? Any kind of example?
Yeah. So the example I have in mind for today is one I refer to as my German story. And if there are people who have known me over the years, they're sick of this story, this German story. They're like, they've heard it and heard it and heard it. But um, it it gives me a lot of joy and inspiration and encouragement. So this is what happened. I was in 1992. I had just started the PhD program in psychology and religion at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, and it took me forever to get ready for that program because I was a biology major undergrad, and this program was a program in psychology and religion. So I cobbled together two master's degrees before I got to this program in order to have the adequate background
Oh,
for
wow.
a graduate degree in religion. Now, I didn't know it was specifically going to be this program, but it took me 7 years to put all of that together to get
Okay.
ready for the program. So now I'm in the program, and I knew that this was a requirement that they were looking for, but I said, let me get into the program first, and we'll deal with the requirement. So the requirement was a language requirement. You had to pass, in my case, a scholarly French exam and a scholarly German exam in order to continue to be accepted in the program. And you had to do this in your first
Both.
semester.
Both languages.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
wow.
I took the French and I passed the French. It's basically a 2 hour exam. You can use dictionaries, you can use whatever you need, but you have to, it's a scholarly piece of writing and you have to translate it accurately into English so that you get a 70% accuracy level. So I passed the French and I was like, yay, okay, wow, that was great. Tried to do the German right afterwards and I failed it miserably. I mean, I totally bombed. I didn't even get one sentence down. I was sweating. I was anxious. I was hyperventilating through the whole exam. And there was just, I was like, what the heck happened there? What was that about? So I was worried. I was concerned. I was concerned that all this work I had done to get into this program was in jeopardy if I couldn't pass this 2 hour exam, right? Because they threatened to kick you out. And I mean, nobody confronted me with that. I don't want to exaggerate that part, but it was in the back of my mind that if I don't pass this, I'm in jeopardy. So I was like, how am I going to pass this exam? So I started studying. I took a summer course. That was a drag. I mean, I was sleeping through that course. Not sleeping through the course, but I was very, very heavy lidded. I was tired all the time. I couldn't stay awake fully. And it was kicking my butt all up and down Broadway in New York City. And anybody who knew me at the time was like, oh, German, I'm struggling with German. German's my nightmare. I can't pass German. How am I going to pass German? I even considered going to live in Germany, taking a leave of absence and going to live in Germany for maybe 6 years so I could really get the language every which way. So anyway, after that summer course and all of that, I took the exam again that following fall. And luckily, nobody was kicking me out of the program yet. And I failed the course the exam just as badly. It was the same thing. I bombed it and I was having panic attacks as I was doing it. So I was like, wow, this is serious. I mean, this is the dragon in the road and I don't know how to slay the dragon. So I tried to study some more. I worried a lot. And then one day I was browsing in bookstores as I like to do a lot, and I stumbled on a hypnosis program. It was in a cassette form, and it was $14, and it said learn German. And I was like, well, I've talked to people, I've tried to figure out how I'm going to work this out. What do I have to lose? 14 bucks, I'll buy this. I started using it every day the way that it recommended. You listen to it every single day for 30 days in a row. If you need to, you do it another 30 days. And I got in touch with so many things on the inside. Most notably that when I was 10 years old, I was sent to boarding school. And one of the classes I had was German.
Oh.
And that I was bullied and hazed and I was in torment as a 10-year-old in boarding school, first time away from home. And here I am having to learn German, which is it was a Martian language to me. I had no basis for understanding. So the blockage and what was coming up every time I was studying or trying to take the exam was all this trauma related to going to boarding school and being exposed to German for the first time.
It sounds like a Pavlov thing, conditioning. You show the dog the sound of the bell and their mouths start to salivate. So you're listening to German and you're like cowering in fear of these bullies. So
the conditioned and unconditioned response. Exactly right. Pavlovian. It's the German is the trigger. It's like the bell for the dog. Now I'm not being bullied, but just German itself, because it was associated with bullying back in the day, triggers a whole reaction that just shuts me down and blocks me. I can't study and I can't execute. There are some nuances and additional color to it, but for brevity's sake, just say that the hypnosis program, basically what it did was it got me in touch with the inner light. And then that inner light began to dissolve the nightmare. I was able to study more effectively the more I listened to the program. I set up a way to test my ability to actually sit comfortably for 2 hours and do a practice exam almost every day, and then grade it myself with the understanding that, oh wow, I'm really doing this. I'm learning German and I'm on my own passing it. And then I took the exam for the third time, and the instructor, who was actually somebody I had known in another school, it was like he popped up all of a sudden, and he was very generous and compassionate. He said, I know you've been trying to do this exam. I can tell from your records. You're almost there. You just keep doing what you're doing. The next time you take it, I'm pretty sure you're going to pass it. And then I took it again and passed it. And then the German nightmare was done.
Fourth time's the charm.
Fourth time's a charm, yeah. So, and again, I'm not at all ashamed to say that, I mean, it kicked my butt. I struggled. But then the solution came to me in this unique way. I feel like Spirit guided me to that audio and then helped me use the audio to transform the nightmare into a happy dream. In other words, I woke up from it, right? So I use hypnosis programs a lot for myself. If there's something I'm just stuck in and I can't seem to progress, whether it's financial or relational or health-wise, and I recommend them a lot to my clients.
Wonderful. So you would say a takeaway from this experience would be to be open to hypnosis programs if someone watching hasn't tried that before, to kind of break down some barriers and past in their past that they might not be aware of, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when I introduce it to clients, they think I'm talking about the pendulum that's swinging in front of you, and I'm going to call you onto stage and I'm going to ask you to bark like a dog or something, right? It's humiliating. It's inappropriate. That's not what these audio programs, these guided things are about at all. They're really gentle meditations that in one way or another take you into that inner source, whether they name it explicitly or not. And then the way that I like to interpret them, and you can add on other things as you're listening to the hypnosis program, like this lesson that we talked about. If you have the conceptual framework about what we went over today, then the hypnosis program can reinforce this idea that you're really basically waking up from the nightmarish matrix. So that's the purpose of them, one way or another. It's not getting you to do ridiculous things that you don't want to do. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. To your point, I would recommend them without hesitation to people. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's very helpful. And those are very accessible. I see it all around me now. Maybe it's more of the circles of media that I'm consuming, but they're out there if you want to find them, even on YouTube.
Okay, yeah, that's right. The Course of Miracles refers to its particular brand of transforming the mind through affirmations and these lessons. It refers to this as mind training, right? And I like that term. For some people, it's a little bit too, sort of severe or scary, but the alternative that the Course talks about is mind wandering, which is that people just wander back into the simulation and they're living in the nightmare in the simulation. So mind training is how you keep yourself from getting sucked into the simulation. And affirmations, hypnosis programs, guided imagery. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we'll talk about, more as we go along. Just illustrating and affirming for people that I think a judicious use of these things can accelerate your mind training.
Cool. I like that a lot. I like the word mind training because it feels active. It feels like something you can actually do, just like you train any other part of your body.
Exactly. It's like going to the gym. And that's how I would frequently say to clients, I'm like your physical trainer. I'm going to say an affirmation. You say it after me. And then they repeat it 5 times. It's like doing 5 push-ups or whatever, and the audios are like that too. You're doing a workout with, a trainer. Yeah, absolutely. You made a great connection there. One of the sites I use a lot, again, they don't pay me to advertise for them. I'm not, I'm not here to promote their products. I just want to support people with a website that they can use. I use it a lot. It's called hypnosisdownloads.com. Hypnosisdownloads.com. You have to pay for the programs. They're about $14 a piece. And I'm not giving medical advice, just a disclaimer. You work with your physician. This isn't in place of any of the professional sort of additional help you can get from a psychologist or a doctor or a lawyer or any of that. It's just adjuncts. They can help to, I think, used correctly, accelerate things.
Wonderful. I'll check out that website. We'll put a link in the description of the video if anyone wants a quick place to access it.
Yeah, super.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Dave. And that is a great lesson we can take away. We can try to separate those dichotomies in our own lives and check in with ourselves and ask, what frame of reference am I coming from? Am I coming from a place of light, place of truth, a place of hope and love, or is this more fear-based, more in the matrix of life and all the craziness that we get sucked into? And how can I train my mind to go back to the place of light and love? Because that's where we want to stay as much as possible.
Absolutely right. And the way hearing you frame that there, I'll just add this one last thing. So a lot of people who are well versed in the Course and other non-dual philosophies understand that the Course is a non-dual philosophy. In other words, it would be, I think, misleading to just end by saying that the dichotomies are what the Course is about, right? It's not about dichotomies. It's actually about helping us get to a place where we transcend the dichotomies, right? So that it's non-dual. It's like we're in love. Love is non-dualistic. We're in truth. It's non-dualistic. We're in forgiveness. It's non-dualistic, and so I just wanted to add that little technical piece for people who are well versed in this. They'll be like, oh, Dave totally made the Course sound like it's dualistic. It's this and that, left and right. It's pointing to the fact that in the ego mind, we see things divided that way. The positive side of each of those things is actually non-dualistic. It's reality. It doesn't have this bifurcated sort of false quality to it. So anyway, just for the...
All right, cool. So I'm going to modify my 2 columns, and I'm going to have those 2 columns there. This is all of our illusion, and above that is this rainbow of absolute truth that we can transcend to at any time. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening if you're on the podcast. And we can't wait to do another one of these next month and get deeper into all of this miracle conversation topics that we love talking about.
Thank you so much, Brittany, for this interview. Thank you to our audience for your interest in what we're doing. And looking forward to next month very much, Brittany.